The yacht was already half underwater when the wealthy heiress pointed toward it and laughed, telling everyone that the rusty old vessel would be the perfect gift for a struggling single father who could never afford anything better. The guests laughed with her, expecting the embarrassed man to refuse. Instead, the father quietly accepted the keys, thanked her, and walked toward the sinking yacht with his young son holding his hand. Nobody knew that beneath the peeling paint and neglected decks was a hidden piece of maritime history worth nearly $11 million. Nobody knew that the humble father had spent his entire life repairing boats. And most importantly, nobody knew that the joke would eventually become the biggest regret of the heiress's life. If you believe kindness can create second chances, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more emotional stories about courage, family, and unexpected miracles. The single father was named Gideon Hart, a quiet 38-year-old mechanic who lived with his 9-year-old son, Milo, in a small apartment near the harbor. After his wife died from an illness several years earlier, Gideon had raised Milo alone. He worked at a modest boat repair yard, fixing engines, cleaning hulls, and restoring damaged fishing vessels. His hands were always covered in grease, his clothes often smelled of saltwater, and every paycheck disappeared quickly into rent, groceries, school expenses, and medical bills. Yet Gideon never complained. He told Milo that a small home filled with love was worth more than the largest mansion without it. Milo adored his father and often spent afternoons at the repair yard, watching him bring broken boats back to life. Across the harbor stood the enormous estate of Serafina Vale, a 29-year-old heiress who had inherited her late father's shipping empire. Her father, Alistair Vale, had been famous for collecting rare vessels, and among his possessions was an enormous luxury yacht named the Aurelia. After his death, Serafina wanted nothing to do with the yacht because it reminded her of the final years of his life and the complicated relationship they had shared. The vessel had been sitting neglected at a private dock for years. Its hull was covered with corrosion, several windows were cracked, and water had begun entering the lower compartments. Marina experts told Serafina that restoring it would cost millions. She decided to get rid of it. During a charity event at the harbor, Serafina noticed Gideon repairing an old fishing boat nearby. Someone jokingly suggested that she donate the Aurelia to him. Serafina laughed and decided to turn the idea into entertainment. In front of dozens of wealthy guests, she announced that the worthless sinking yacht belonged to Gideon now. The crowd laughed as someone handed him the keys. Gideon looked at the massive vessel, then at Milo, who was staring at it with wide eyes. Instead of feeling insulted, Gideon thanked Serafina. He knew the yacht was in terrible condition, but something about its structure seemed strangely familiar. The next morning, Gideon took Milo aboard. He spent hours examining the engine room, the hull, and the electrical systems. He noticed that the yacht's original construction was far more sophisticated than its neglected appearance suggested. Certain components had been custom-built decades earlier, and the craftsmanship was extraordinary. Gideon began researching the vessel's history. What he discovered made him stop breathing for several seconds. The Aurelia had not been an ordinary luxury yacht. It had been privately commissioned by Alistair Vale using a rare experimental marine design that had later disappeared from production. The vessel contained technology and craftsmanship that made it exceptionally valuable to collectors. Gideon contacted a marine surveyor, who initially laughed at the idea that the ruined yacht could be valuable. But after inspecting the vessel, the surveyor's attitude completely changed. Hidden beneath layers of corrosion was an almost perfectly preserved original hull structure. The engine room contained rare equipment. Even more astonishingly, sealed compartments held original design documents, navigation equipment, and historical artifacts connected to Alistair Vale's shipping empire. The yacht was not worthless. Experts estimated that after restoration, it could be worth approximately $11 million. News of the discovery reached Serafina. At first, she refused to believe it. Then she visited the marina and saw Gideon standing beside the vessel. The yacht that she had donated as a joke was suddenly one of the most valuable assets connected to her family's history. Her lawyers advised her to challenge the donation, arguing that she had never intended to transfer something worth millions. But Gideon had the signed transfer documents. The donation was legally recorded. He could have fought Serafina and demanded every advantage available to him. Instead, he invited her aboard. Serafina expected anger. Gideon showed her the old photographs he had discovered inside a sealed cabinet. One showed Alistair Vale standing beside the yacht during its launch. Another showed a much younger Serafina sitting on her father's shoulders on the deck. Gideon realized that the yacht was not merely a valuable object. It was part of a family story that Serafina had tried to forget. Serafina became emotional. For years, she had believed her father valued the yacht and his business more than he valued her. But Gideon discovered letters hidden inside the vessel showing something different. Alistair had written about his daughter repeatedly, describing his hope that she would one day understand why he had worked so hard. He had planned to give her the Aurelia as a symbol of their family history, but his illness had prevented him from finishing the restoration. Serafina cried when she read the letters. The yacht she had mocked was suddenly the last unfinished gift her father had ever intended for her. Gideon offered to restore it with her. Together, they spent months rebuilding the Aurelia. Gideon worked alongside marine engineers, refusing to take unnecessary shortcuts. Serafina funded the restoration but remained deeply involved. Milo visited every weekend and helped his father polish small pieces of brass. Slowly, the ruined yacht transformed into something breathtaking. When the restoration was finally completed, the Aurelia was valued at $11 million. Serafina could have taken the yacht back. Instead, she surprised Gideon. She told him that the vessel should belong to him because he had been the one who saved it. Gideon refused to accept it without conditions. He proposed turning the Aurelia into a floating educational center for children from low-income families. It would teach marine engineering, navigation, environmental science, and boat restoration. Serafina agreed immediately. The yacht became a symbol of second chances. Gideon became the director of the program, while Serafina used her family's resources to fund scholarships for children who could never have afforded such opportunities. Years later, Milo would tell people that his father's greatest achievement was not restoring an $11 million yacht. It was restoring a broken relationship between a daughter and the memory of her father. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes that kindness can transform humiliation into hope. Leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more inspiring stories about family, forgiveness, and second chances. Special request. Please comment. Never underestimate what someone can rebuild. As the warm afternoon sunlight reflected across the restored Aurelia, Gideon stood on the deck with Milo beside him while Serafina watched children explore the vessel for the first time. She remembered the day she had laughed and called the yacht worthless. Now she understood that she had never truly given Gideon a broken boat. She had unknowingly given him an opportunity to rebuild something that everyone else had abandoned. Gideon had repaired more than an $11 million yacht. He had repaired a forgotten dream, helped a grieving daughter forgive her father, and created a future for children who needed someone to believe in them. And as the golden sunlight spread across the harbor, Serafina finally understood the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes the things we throw away as worthless are simply waiting for the right person to reveal their true value. The warm afternoon sunlight spread across the harbor as the Aurelia began its second life. What had once been a neglected yacht slowly became a place filled with children, engineers, teachers, and families who had never imagined they would step aboard an $11 million vessel. Gideon Hart stood on the restored deck watching Milo help a group of students assemble a small navigation system. He smiled quietly, remembering the first day he had accepted the yacht when everyone else had laughed. Back then, he had only wanted something that might give him and Milo a new opportunity. He never imagined the vessel would become a symbol of hope. Serafina Vale often stood beside him during these afternoons, no longer the distant heiress who had treated the yacht as a joke, but a woman who had learned to respect the value of things she once considered worthless. The educational program quickly became popular throughout the city. Children from low-income families were invited to spend weekends aboard the Aurelia, learning marine engineering and environmental science from experienced professionals. Gideon personally taught them how engines worked, how to recognize damaged components, and how patience could transform something broken into something useful. He always reminded the students that their circumstances did not determine their future. Many children arrived believing that successful careers belonged only to wealthy families. Gideon wanted them to leave understanding that talent could come from anywhere. Milo became one of the program's youngest volunteers, proudly showing younger students around the yacht and telling them how his father had restored it piece by piece. But success brought an unexpected challenge. A large international corporation offered Serafina an enormous amount of money to purchase the Aurelia and the technology discovered inside it. The offer was so large that even Serafina's advisors urged her to accept. They argued that the money could expand her shipping empire and make her one of the youngest billionaires in the region. Serafina considered the proposal carefully. Gideon never told her what decision to make. He simply reminded her that the yacht had already become something much more important than an asset. It had become a place where children were discovering possibilities they had never known existed. Serafina eventually rejected the offer. The decision shocked her board. Some directors accused her of allowing emotions to interfere with business. Serafina calmly explained that her father had spent his life building wealth, but his greatest unfinished gift had been a vessel that could now give others opportunities. She would not turn that gift into another number on a financial report. The board eventually supported her after seeing the program's growing impact. The decision also changed Serafina's relationship with her father's memory. For years, she had been angry at him. Now she finally understood that his final years had been filled with plans for her future that illness had prevented him from completing. One evening, Serafina opened another box of her father's belongings. Inside was a handwritten notebook she had never seen before. The pages contained designs for a larger version of the Aurelia and notes about using the vessel to train young engineers. Alistair had apparently dreamed of creating a foundation that would give disadvantaged children access to maritime education. He had never managed to complete the project. Serafina cried as she read the final page. Her father had written that he hoped one day his daughter would finish what he had started. She immediately took the notebook to Gideon. Together, they decided to expand the foundation beyond one yacht. They created scholarships, apprenticeships, and paid training programs for young people interested in marine technology. Gideon insisted that the program also include children of single parents because he understood personally how difficult it could be to build a future while raising a child alone. Serafina agreed without hesitation. She knew that Gideon's struggles had given the project a purpose that money alone could never create. Then an unexpected problem threatened everything. A storm struck the harbor with terrifying force. Winds tore through the docks, waves crashed against the marina, and several smaller boats broke loose from their moorings. The staff evacuated the Aurelia, but Gideon remained nearby because he knew the vessel's systems better than anyone. He watched the storm approaching and realized that one of the mooring lines had been damaged. If the yacht broke free, it could crash into the neighboring docks and destroy several other vessels. Gideon entered the storm. Serafina tried to stop him, but he knew what needed to be done. Fighting against the wind and rain, he reached the damaged line and secured an emergency cable. The operation took only minutes, but the conditions were dangerous. When he finally returned to shore, exhausted and soaked, Milo ran toward him and hugged him tightly. Serafina watched with tears in her eyes. She realized that Gideon's courage had never come from believing himself invincible. It came from understanding that other people depended on him. The storm eventually passed. The Aurelia survived, but the experience convinced Serafina that the Foundation needed a stronger safety program. She funded advanced emergency training for every student and employee. Gideon developed practical rescue courses based on his years working around boats. The program eventually became recognized as one of the best maritime education initiatives in the region. Years passed. Milo grew into a brilliant young engineer. He earned a scholarship and eventually studied marine technology at university. On his graduation day, Gideon stood proudly in the audience while Serafina sat beside him. Milo's final project was an environmentally friendly propulsion system inspired by the technology hidden inside the Aurelia. His work attracted international attention. Gideon watched his son accept the award and remembered the days when he had worried about paying for school supplies. He realized that the yacht had never truly made them rich. The opportunity had. The courage to use it had. The decision to help others had. After the ceremony, Milo hugged his father and told him that none of this would have happened without him. Gideon shook his head. He told Milo that he had only shown him where the first door was. Milo had walked through it himself. If this story touched your heart, Please like the video, share it with someone who believes that one opportunity can change an entire family, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more emotional stories about courage, family, kindness, and second chances. Special request, please comment, give someone a chance before judging their circumstances. As the warm afternoon sunlight returned to the harbor, Gideon stood aboard the Aurelia with Milo and Serafina. The yacht was no longer sinking, and neither was the dream that had been hidden inside it. Serafina looked across the water and remembered the day she had laughed while giving the vessel away. She had believed she was donating a useless wreck to a poor father. Instead, Gideon had shown her that wealth was not measured by what could be sold. It was measured by what could be shared. The $11 million yacht had become valuable because someone had believed it deserved another chance. And Gideon understood that the same principle applied to people. Sometimes all a struggling person needs is one opportunity, one person willing to believe, and one moment when someone chooses kindness instead of judgment. As the golden afternoon light reflected across the water, father and son stood together on the deck, grateful for the strange joke that had changed their lives forever. The warm afternoon sunlight stretched across the harbor as Gideon stood on the upper deck of the Aurelia, watching dozens of students gather for the Foundation's annual maritime competition. Years had passed since Serafina had handed him the keys as a joke, yet the yacht had become far more valuable than anyone could have imagined. It was no longer simply an $11 million vessel. It had become a classroom, a training center, and a symbol of second chances. Milo, now a talented young marine engineer, stood beside his father reviewing the students' projects. Gideon looked at his son with quiet pride and remembered the little boy who had once helped him clean rust from the yacht's engine room. Life had changed dramatically, but Gideon had never forgotten the nights when he had worried about rent, school expenses, and whether he could provide Milo with a future. Serafina arrived carrying an old leather folder that had belonged to her father. She told Gideon that she had discovered something important while reviewing the family's historical records. Alistair Vale had apparently placed a portion of his private fortune into a hidden trust shortly before his death. The trust was designed to support young engineers and children from families facing financial hardship. However, because the documents had been sealed, nobody in the family knew about it. Serafina believed her father had intended the trust to become the foundation that the Aurelia would eventually lead. She wanted Gideon and Milo to help determine how the money should be used. Gideon immediately suggested creating a permanent scholarship fund rather than using the money for another luxury project. The discovery transformed the foundation. With the new funding, they opened training centers in several coastal cities and provided scholarships to students who had never imagined attending university. Gideon insisted that every center include practical workshops where students could work with real machinery instead of learning only from textbooks. He believed that hands-on experience had saved him throughout his life. Serafina supported the idea completely. She had learned that her father's greatest legacy was not the fortune he left behind but the opportunity to use that fortune to improve other people's lives. Yet the past was not finished with Serafina. A former advisor to her father, Malcolm Crowe, appeared unexpectedly and claimed that the yacht's technology had been stolen from another company decades earlier. He threatened to take legal action against the foundation unless Serafina paid him a large settlement. The accusation immediately attracted media attention. Headlines questioned whether the Aurelia's $11 million valuation had been based on intellectual property that did not belong to the Vale family. Investors became nervous, and several members of Serafina's board demanded that the foundation temporarily suspend its programs. Gideon refused to panic.